All right. I wanted to have you on this episode because we've met multiple times in Phoenix. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But first, for our audience, please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more about your background, your career path, what you've been focusing on.
Yeah, totally. I like to keep it simple. I like to just say that I'm Tim Cleaver and I make software. I've been lucky enough in my career to make software at institutions both large and small, ranging from 3 people to 70,000 people, giant enterprises. And along that way, I've been fortunate enough to sort of mentor lots of software developers, get really into the weeds on software development and the mechanics of building software. And my focus is primarily in that area, in developer experience and sort of like helping organizations make the best possible software they can, which again just sort of gets back to that engineering root of I'm Tim Cleaver. I like to make software.
Introduction. Now, because we have passed together, I know from you directly that you didn't really start your career in software, but you were a drummer in a rock band. So, can you tell us a bit more about that, and how does someone go from that to leading developer experience in one of the largest financial institutions in the world?
Yeah, I am a technology as a second career guy, like so many people are, and much love to everyone that comes to technology as a second career. A lot of us come from other places originally, but yeah, I tried to chase the rock and roll dream, and it actually has a ton of transferable skills. Not that I knew that at the time, but it served me really well. And honestly, that's probably an entire 30-minute podcast, you and me someday. Like I'll have you on and we'll call it like the rock and roll engineer or something like that. But both on the business side and the product side of sort of getting a small team or a band down the road in an old van and schlepping gear and getting on stage and getting off stage and selling t-shirts and wearing multiple hats, both that side prepares you a lot for a software engineering career, as well as the physical production of music. When I think about the technical skills, if you think about a large mixing board, I don't know if you've ever had to sit in front of a 128 channel SSL, but what's a mute button other than sort of an if then? You're talking about lots of channels. They need to be coordinated. They need to be organized. You've got a patch bay where you're moving. This is just a CI/CD system. And at the end, it has to come out the left speaker and the right speaker, and it has to sound nice. So, I mean, in that way, all that logical gate, I mean, that prepared me for a life in software. And then, add in a tremendous amount of luck. And here we are.
So when people are now talking about vibe coding, you were in the vibe way before it started.
Yeah. Just it was. I added the coding to the vibes. Some people are adding vibes to the coding.
That's definitely not a classic career path, but I'm glad you joined the team, and and you're now part of this world. So you've been in the past years working for American Express. Can you tell us a bit more? What does it mean to be responsible for tens of thousands of engineers building software day to day and their experience? What is in a few sentences? What is the responsibility there?
Yeah, that role, and I think any DX role in a large organization or even a smaller organization, you play this role as like the great negotiator. And there's 3 sort of like vectors pulling in different directions that I like to think about as you sit in the middle of that. You have the business, and you have productivity, and you have delivering for your customers. So important, right? Like work has to get done. Money needs to get made. Things need to get delivered. You have another vector pulling in a different direction. You're talking about risk, security, safety, trust, long-term viability, maintainability, all of this stuff. And then you have the third vector, the quite frankly, the most enjoyable vector. You've got developer satisfaction and sort of just employee satisfaction, right? Like just everybody enjoying the work. You can get a ton more productivity by beating everybody with a shovel, but that's going to last maybe, 3 weeks before everybody quits and you're left with nothing, right? So it's not a very durable to let any one of these vectors pull too hard. The most secure computer is one that's often unplugged. So if you let that vector pull too hard, nothing gets done. If you let the developer satisfaction vector pull too hard, we're all vibe coding, fun time, personal projects, and like we're running in 1,000 directions. So you sit at the middle of those kinds of intersections of desires, and you negotiate to make sure, frankly, in any negotiation, it's sort of the like, if everyone's kind of mad at you, you've done a great job. If everyone gave up one piece. So, when I think about developer experiences, to sit right there at that and look at those three vectors, and just like trade-offs in software, isn't life just trade-offs? Just like trade-offs in software, negotiate sort of the best outcome for all of those interested parties.
Understood. So it's just we're going to talk about many transformations that you've been, orchestrating. But when and you had a very large overview of the SDLC, right, in the organization.
Yeah.
So when you looked at the organization and at the SDLC, what was clearly broken? And that's kind of like the background we want to set, to discuss later on what are going to be the main transformations you would be eventually running there.
Yeah, when we talk about broken, I'd hesitate to ever say anything's broken. I know I'm not dodging the question there, but if you look at any business that produces software and is still in business, they're somehow getting the job done. Like the business works. And this applies to small startups and large, huge multinational organizations. But like at some level, it works. The big thing I think we talk about when we look at SDLCs is waste, and sort of like how much effort, how much money, how much resource, and how much just sort of like human heroics have to go into making it work. And so are you running at, truthfully, and these things are hard to measure and everybody measures them sort of differently, but are you running at 20% efficiency? Right? And are you leaving 80% on the table? And you've seen it, I'm sure, as you talk to CEOs or CTOs, where they're saying, my engineering budget gets bigger every year, and I feel like I get less out the door every year, and I keep putting money in the system. And sure, we still have customers and features come out, and the thing is sort of moving forward. Our business is viable. Like the SDLC technically works, but are you losing 80% of your investment, 85% of your investment? How much are you leaving on the table? And that problem is not different between large organizations and small organizations. I think you just see the scale of it sort of exponentially grow. When you're at a 300 person startup, they have these problems too. Now, when it's just me and you sitting in a room, we can sort of get over some of these efficiencies by turning around and like tapping each other on the back or saying, hey, let's go to lunch and sort this out. We got a problem here, right? You can't do that in a 20,000 person engineering org. And so that efficiency really, really just grows. So we always talked about it a lot. Like, I don't know if you've watched television shows like Kitchen Nightmares or Bar Rescue or these kinds of things where they come in and they say, you're pouring all the liquor down the drain, you're throwing all the food in the trash, or you're all these things. It's like you are serving food, but you're not able to like capitalize or make money on your investment because you're just throwing in the trash. So like that's the big thing I think when you talk about an SDLC at enterprise scale is fighting the waste, finding it.
Okay, so productivity is definitely one way to look at what you just said. How do you improve it? And I think that was, and it's still of course, one of the main promises of AI, right?
Yeah.
And and you've run different processes before LLMs came to our life. I know you've been involved with bringing GitHub to the organization, and it's a lot of processing when you're working at the scale of such organization. But let's talk about AI and
Yeah.
and,
You can't have a podcast and not talk about AI.
exactly. And but mostly I think that what interesting is to see the and to learn from your experience about the friction and challenges around that, and how do you bring AI at such a scale. So I know you started with Copilot, and I was curious to like learn how did developers respond to that. What was the first impression that you got when you started introducing these tools?
Yeah, I think as you look across the industry and at large organizations where I've participated in these kinds of things, I think you really got to think about these things like a product. I was talking with a friend recently. I won't name the employer nor the friend, but like they got a mandate from the top that was basically like, here's a bag of AI tools, do AI, we'll catch you later. Right. And it was that. It was like, do AI. And you're like, okay. And take out the magic and the fun of AI and all the exciting things that are happening, and just like go back to, old school tools. Go into a room of 10 people, give them all power tools, right? Give them all like sawzalls, and just say, do saws. You're doing saws now, and come back in an hour and just see what kind of chaos you have unleashed. They're probably sawing in different directions. Someone's probably injured themselves terribly. Like these, like all of these things are probably outcomes because you say, well, you just lobbed power tools into a room and walked away and expected magic, and we know that doesn't work. And so, like as you look at these things, I think it's about thinking about them like a product, and thinking about them like and packaging them up, and sort of saying like, here's what we're trying to achieve, here's how you can be successful, here's how this is going to improve your life. The same kinds of product discussions you have when you do anything. And then I think you like all great things, you have to manage community, right? Inside an organization, or even in outside of an organization. Change is hard. And you talk about people being afraid, especially with AI. Is it coming for my job? Am I training my replacement? All of this stuff, which again, I don't think to be true. And I'm super optimistic. I'm grandly optimistic about the AI future. But, like if you don't manage those kinds of things, in addition to sort of giving people proven paths, ways to succeed, we see this across the industry right now. You see a lot of companies turning off their sort of like token maxing dashboards and things like that. You've seen those kinds of things in the news because, again, go back and says use AI. And so the bill went up and we saw all this token usage. But then are we getting better business outcomes? Are our customers happier? Is there more money in the bank? All those kinds of things you got to think about if you're a CEO. So like, I think when you look at those things, I think where we can all do a better job is thinking about this from a product sense, even internally in your organization, and say, I am delivering a new experience. Think about it with that product mindset of improving people's lives, outcomes that they will actually benefit from. And then, hopefully adoption comes along, right? And then again, you're still always going to have your adoption curves. Like those are real inside organizations as much as they are outside of organizations.
Just double clicking on this part, because there is a difference between adoption and impact, right?
Right.
And what you talked about is how do we give the tools, right, the product to the people so they start using it, but in a way that is measurable and creates impact for the company.
Right.
Can you give us like one example of something that you did or experienced during this time that moved the needle from just playing with and hopefully not cutting any fingers with, but actually delivering value? And how did you like identify what to do and how you actually executed that?
I think that's the great challenge we have with AI right now as an industry. I think I'm going to steal Kent Beck's term here is like we got this genie and it's exciting and it's new. And you know how engineers like me and you, new tools, new shiny things are always so wonderful. We always dive in, right? And it seems like in cycles, we dive in and we forget everything we've learned since Bell Labs in the 60s. Then we have to kind of like refigure it out. And when I think about that, I think that's the struggle we're actually on right now. Like we all have this wonderful new thing and we lost the collaboration, we lost the coordination, we lost the orchestration, and we all became sort of like very siloed single units. And we know that siloed single units firing in every direction does not a cohesive product or organization make, right? And so I think that's the really interesting space to play in now, where you'd say, we all got our feet wet with this. We all experimented. We all saw how fast it could go. We all saw some interesting tips and tricks, right? Like go up and down your LinkedIn feed and it's pretty much nothing but here's a neat thing I got AI to do yesterday, right? Which again, great, play and experiment. I mean, so much innovation comes out of play. But moving into turning it into business processes, turning it into durable workflows that provide leverage and say, we want you to utilize it in this way, or we have orchestrated it to do this. Here is the part you play in this system. Here's what you do, right? Finding out where humans add the most value, putting them in that position to win, and then letting agents provide value where they provide value, right? So I think as we arc across the industry right now, moving away from sort of like individual AI babysitters to orchestrators of automated and agentic business processes is the next cool leap. And there's a lot of people working on that. That's not unique to what I'm doing, but I think that really changes our focus maybe about like what we want these things to do, right? Like where are the real bottlenecks? And again, smarter people than me have talked about how it's not making code. You think about a large organization, with sort of, I don't want to say limitless because everybody's got a budget, but like, these really, really large organizations have never had a trouble making code. They can offshore things. We can hire contract labor. You can hire up as many people as you want, right? It's the ability to make code is sort of magical for the individual because now I can run a 45 person agent team and I can get more productivity done personally. But large organizations have never had that trouble. So like, where is the other bottlenecks in the SDLC? Where are our planning bottlenecks? Where are our coordination bottlenecks? Where are our understanding and knowledge bottlenecks? Where are our debt bottlenecks on the backside and post audits and things like that? Where are review bottlenecks? All of those bottlenecks, I think, are the great frontier to sort of like chase. And again, that's really redesigning the SDLC and your business processes for an agentic world.
All right. You've mentioned a few things that are good bridges to my next questions. And
Yeah.
large enterprises, large organizations, they create a lot of code over many, many years.
Yeah.
Kind of like the subject that interests us specifically at Swim. And what we've noticed, and it's not a secret anymore, is AI tools work beautifully on clean and modern code, which is not exactly what you have in organizations with thousands of people who have been writing code over years and years. So on a 20-year-old or more Java code base, with the problem of documentation in general, we've discussed in the past, documentation is not something that people ever love to do. So in many cases, uh, um, it's a challenge, and it's even more of a challenge in the AI era because AI needs context there. So did you hit that wall, and how did you look at?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge in that, like, when you look at the demos of AI, and again, I'm not bashing them. These things are incredible. These are changing the industry as we speak. But boy, are they almost always look at it, make a greenfield thing from a really, really clean spec that one person wrote. You're like, that's awesome and that's super cool, but that's not life, right? And to your point about AI doesn't, handle a undocumented, untested legacy code base that well. Neither do human beings, right? That's not really an AI problem. That's just a problem. And so, when you look at those things, what you really find out is that it's quite possible that those processes and programs and those code bases are being maintained purely on sort of like human heroics, like just like over the top heroics by maybe single or small teams and things like that. And so, how do you get from there to the agentic world? And like you say, without context, without understanding, without something, it's going to bash its head into the wall. It's going to make a lot of big mistakes. It is a very persistent sort of thing where it will keep hitting the wall until it finds a way, and without giving it some kind of measure of success. Automated test suite is helpful, but some kind of measure of success, it's going to struggle. So those are very real things, but they sort of exist today. I mean, if you think about any large organization, there's like that project over there that no one likes to touch and everybody's scared and we don't totally know what it does and like we don't want to touch it. Like that's very human behavior as well. So where we think about those things, I think, is how do we help use agents not to sort of run into the same problems with legacy that humans do, because we sort of know they exist and we don't need to hit them faster. And but like, where can we deploy agents to say, where can we put these things on a 24 hours round the clock cycle to dig us out of this hole, right? And like that's when you think about the accumulated 20 years of work, accumulated 20 years of, we'll come back to that later, and accumulated 20 years of, let's just defer that till the next sprint, and accumulated 20 years of like, we'll handle that in Q4. Can agents chop that backlog down and get us back to a world where, we can work on this software, human or agent?
Right. First, when we talk now, you mentioned that documentation is used to be a human problem before it became an AI problem. And when we met the first time, it was about knowledge transfer, the thing that lives in people's heads and usually nowhere else. Do you feel like AI helps with it or make it worse? Like using this tool to create more knowledge, or just creates a bigger gap because it's so much easier to write code, generate code, and then there is a drift between about what we know on the application rather than what exists in the code base itself. So, is this gap growing?
I think I am really optimistic about documentation in the AI world, not only because of sort of like the rate that it can be generated and created and sort of maintained, but it's actually on the other side where I think the power is in that, agents and AI can read faster than humans can, right? They can run around and sort of like absorb documentation at a very incredible rate. And for that reason, because documentation is now very obviously and very tangibly operational, I think people are writing it more. And look no further than we have no statistics on this, maybe like Anthropic does, but like how many gigantic Claude.mds have been written in the last year, right? And so like this idea that like that developers don't write documentation is like, well, wait a minute, like in this case, we see them starting that process, right? They're writing these huge contexts. Like, do this, don't do this, do this, do it this way. This means this, right? All of it. And we're piling and piling and piling up these Claude docs or agents.md or whatever your agent du jour is. And sort of like it's incentivizing people to write more documentation, keep better documentation, because they can see the value very quickly. Dan, the CEO of ChainGuard, I think he wrote on his LinkedIn, he says, we're writing more documentations because agents actually read it, kind of a dig at like the old problem of like making tons and tons of documentation that sits stale. So I think it's actually a really interesting thing in that, because AI does consume documentation very, very quickly, very aggressively. It's always eating and sort of picking up context. Then you say like, well, now suddenly I, the developer, can almost see instant value in creating it, putting it on a loop, making sure it's up to date, making sure it like now, when you could see that value trade, we go back to those product ideas and say, oh, documentation creation as a product now has value to me.
Documentation was never so sexy as nowadays. All right.
Yeah. That's good news for swim.
All right. So we have many entrepreneurs, watching these episodes, and a lot of them are trying to sell an AI solution to enterprise. So I think, from your perspective, that would be interesting to learn. What usually kills enterprise tool adoption? You've seen, I guess, good tools with real budgets, but there's still a flop there. So what's the pattern, and how to help entrepreneurs navigate this?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very interesting field of study, and I am no expert, but it is interesting. It goes back to some of those product fundamentals where you'd say, like, why did beta? I'm going to date myself wildly, but like, why did VHS beat Betamax? Right, like a technically superior product, but it lost. Why, when you see these competing technologies come out in markets, like, why did we choose Blu-ray? Like, how did that win? Right, like, and then sometimes it's not necessarily about the product or the technology itself. It's about, why did the CD beat mini disc? I don't totally know, but somebody's got the details on that, right? And so I think you have to look at it holistically, and I think you have to look at everything you have. And you say, when you're talking about bringing a product into an enterprise, especially a large enterprise, first of all, it's about understanding sort of the task you are up against. And I think the other one, the biggest piece of advice, if I could give something like small and suitable, is there is a really rough transition in most enterprises from proof of concept to scale. And I've seen a lot of them die right there, where either there is no plan after proof of concept, which is like, you go in, let's get 150 licenses or even 1,000 licenses. Let's just show this thing is cool, and we'll sort out how we roll out after that. And then you get to the end of that, and you go, wow, that is cool. Well, it's going to die on the vine now, right? Like, that happens all the time. So, understanding like the whole plan, even if it's a sketch, sort of needs to be there, and really coming to understand how you talk in those like executive enterprise terms, right? If you're going to have a migration, if you're going to have to train some people, if you're going to do these things, understand in a large organization that might be a multi-year thing, and it might have a dollar cost. Say, okay, it's going to be this 2-year project to make the whole picture real and amazing. And we estimate, based on our best thing, that's going to cost, I'm throwing out fake numbers here, that's going to cost $5 million, right? And then you're going to have an ongoing cost of $1 million every year after that. You really have to justify, okay, you're gonna invest $5 million. What do you get back in 2 years for that $5 million? Really talking those senior leader terms. Of course, the technology is cool. Of course, what you built is awesome. Of course, you're in any, these emails that come in. Of course, you're the leader in your industry, and you have the algorithm that smokes everyone else's. But if you can't justify what you bought for $5 million, tough times, right? And we know that measuring software productivity, we know that measuring sort of like delivery is very difficult, especially when you're on the outside, especially when you're outside the moat. And so like that's the real challenge. If you unlock that secret, you're probably golden.
Good challenge here. Okay, thank you so much, Tim, for all these insights. Very interesting discussion as usual. I'm always enjoying these moments. Just last one, before saying goodbye. The developer role is changing now, and it's a mix of developers, agents. So, for someone who has been focusing on developer experience, what is next for you?
What is next for me? Well, I'm Tim, and I make software. And like you say, it has changed. It has changed, and I think there's an incredible opportunity here, not only to help and steward organizations and people through that change, but also really look at some of maybe the ways we've been doing things for a long time and do them differently. One of the biggest things I talk about, especially when we talk about developer experience, is that every developer on earth got a promotion and has a different job now. And I don't think anybody really told them. And so, like, being a steward of saying, I'm going to take it all the way back to music. I'm by miracle, I'm going to connect the dots here. But like, we have all become software Rick Rubins. We have all become software record producers, right? Your job is to coordinate this team of agents and bring out something beautiful and distill from it truth and honesty and all this good stuff so that you make a really incredible product. But you are now the record producer. You are no longer the guitar player, as much as I know you love playing guitar. And then, really, as an organizational level, talking about what does it mean to communicate in a agentic world? What does it mean to build these teams? What roles do we have? How do we look at the SDLC and get to the real problems? You and me, we were talking earlier how, like, code, I don't know, I don't think code ever was really the problem. And if you've ever read books like Meeting Design, where you say, like, how do you get 10 people on the same page, and like how many crossing intersections of agreement does it take to do that? Like, that's where your real challenges are. So if you think about me and the things that I'm doing and the stuff that I'm excited about, I am very rarely working on agents or agentic fleets that make code. I mean, they make code, but I'm working on agents that plan. I'm working on agents that do architectural reviews. I'm putting governance agents to run around and make sure everything's okay. I'm trying to clean up, right? All of that code maintenance, all of those things we've deferred, all of those we'll get to it later. Let's put agents on those kinds of things. Let's have it on the back end of the process. And so, really looking at a holistic SDLC and thinking about, how do we collect knowledge? How do we store context? How do we react to signals? How do we inject human understanding, judgment, taste? These kinds of record producer-esque things. That's what I'm chasing. I mean, like, and it's a very human thing. It's a very Andy Grove managerial, task relevant maturity, sort of like, what can I trust my agents to do? Where do they need oversight? An hour before this, I had a stand up with my agent fleet this morning, right? Like, we do that. I say, good morning, agents. What did you build for me last night while I was sleeping? And they tell me, and they say, here's what we're going to do today, right? Like, that's a very real human thing. We've all been in a stand up, but like, it still applies to these workers we have now. So, like, that's the cool things that I'm excited about and working on is getting back to that collaborative nature. How do we collaborate better? How do we build things together better? How do we get out of these agentic genie silos that we've sort of built ourselves into? And how do we get back to the fun of delivering together? Again, developer experience means all developers. How do we all work together again?
Tim Clever, the Quincy Jones of the SDLC.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if I could get that nickname, that would be fantastic.
Thank you so much for your time. Good luck with everything. I'm rooting for you, and hope we can meet in person soon.
All right, talk to you soon. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Bye, Tim.